afternoon, everyone. So before I get into the monologue of my presentation, let's do a quick interactive exercise. There is a lot of fun, excitement, doom, gloom, all sorts of things are happening around AI. We don't understand it entirely. People are saying all sorts of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quote two extremely famous personalities in the business and discipline of science and analytics and artificial intelligence, and let's see if any of you can guess who said this. So the first one, success in creating AI would be the biggest event in human history. Unfortunately, it might also be the last, unless we learn how to avoid the risks. Any guesses who said this? That's right, Stephen Hawking. The more interesting one, AI doesn't have to be evil to destroy humanity. If AI has a goal and humanity just happens in the way, it will destroy humanity as a matter of course, without even thinking about it, no hard feelings. Who said this? That's right, Elon Musk. So with that, let me get into artificial intelligence, analytics, and what it's doing to the media and entertainment industry. Okay, so if you look at this slide, we keep saying data is the new oil. This is the slide right here. If you just look 10 years back, 2009, the oil block were the most valuable companies in the world. So if you see the top 10 companies by market valuation, 4 of them were oil companies. Fast forward to today, 10 years later, there are 7 tech companies where the mainstay is data. And hence, we say data is the new oil. Well, guess what? This is not just a generic statement. Even in our media and entertainment industry, if you look at this landscape, and if you look at the growth of market valuation of companies over the last decade, the only company, or the only 2 companies that have seen sizable growth, one is Disney, on account of their numerous acquisitions and the fact that they are converting themselves into a direct-to-consumer company. And then you have Netflix. Netflix has seen a 40x growth. And the mainstay of Netflix is data, and I'm going to talk about that a little more. And then you see this slide. Artificial intelligence within the analytics space is growing at an exponential rate. Well, the good news and what heartens me is that media and entertainment industry is right up there in terms of adoption of artificial intelligence. Now, when you look at this slide and you look at media and entertainment, you often say, okay, digital media is coming, FANG is here, so they are the ones who are adopting artificial intelligence. However, guess what? Out of the $9.7 billion that have been invested across various domains in media and entertainment industry, the biggest chunk has been deployed in the most traditional part of our industry, which is production and broadcast services. That's the single largest chunk where analytics and AI has been used in the industry. If you look on the right side, the top 3 media companies in the world, they are all, while they are consolidating, they are making heavy investments in technology companies. So let's see what's happening. Netflix, all this while, was the biggest aggregator of content, and back of that, they have grown 40x, which we just saw a few slides back. However, Disney has just launched Disney+. AT&T Time Warner have announced they are launching HBO Max. Both Comcast, NBC, and Viacom, CBS are in the process of launching their own OTT applications, direct-to-consumer applications. Now, it doesn't get restricted to that. What is it that they are doing? They are pulling off content from Netflix. So the single highest watched show on Netflix is Office. Second is Friends. Both the shows go off Netflix next year. All Disney content goes off Netflix by the end of this year. So what is Netflix now being forced to do? Netflix, while it's a data-based company and they make most of their decisions backed on basis data, they are going to now start adopting the route of traditional media companies. So they are investing more and more in creating their own content. And this is just the growth in their content budgets that you can see. So let's talk about the value system of media. So the 3 main constituents of the value system of media are content creators, which is companies like ours, advertisers, where we make all our revenue from, and consumers for whom we create content. Media is an interesting industry. Before digital media came in, which became more direct to consumer, we traditionally have been a B2B2C company, C industry. Our revenues come from businesses, which is advertising predominantly, but whom we cater to, or on the back of what the revenue comes in, is our consumer might. So let's see across the spectrum, how is artificial intelligence, how is analytics making a difference? So let's start with content creators. So while this video is going on, this is a movie called Morgan.
It's first birthday.
And you'll see that on the next slide. There would be days and hours that would be spent on creating a trailer for a movie. Now, what this company did was it used IBM Watson. It fed IBM Watson with all the consumption patterns of users. What are they watching? Where are they pausing? What are they skipping? And then they fed the machine the entire movie. It picked up from what it had learned from consumer behavior. It picked up the top 10 scenes, and this trailer was created by IBM Watson. This is not created by any human being. And let me tell you, in the film industry, creation of trailers is a big department, because the reason you go to watch a movie is this.
Skip, don't go in there, okay?
Don't what?
Don't you go down there, Skip.
Don't be afraid, Amy. I have to go say goodbye to Mother.
So 10 to 30 days is what it takes on an average to create a trailer for a movie. Watson did that in 24 hours. And this is just the beginning. This was the prototype. This was a POC done. This is all coming our way. The same thing happened in sports. So the highlights that are created in sports, that are created again by experts that are sitting out there, that are watching the sports, but the system did the same thing. It trained by using a wide array of sports and by feeding sports streams. It used audio excitement, sentiment analysis, player tracking to enhance the video output, and then it created highlights. And it didn't not just create highlights, it created highlights tagging the players, tagging the moves, and all of a sudden you could now search for anything that you liked in that sport and it would throw up a video, because the system was creating this video. Netflix, well, this is a very common case study. I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but what Netflix essentially did was, when it was commissioning House of Cards, it saw the original House of Cards, which was a UK show, which came in much before the Netflix House of Cards. It saw they analyzed the entire behavior of David Fincher, and they analyzed Kevin Spacey, and the intersect of the three is what was used to create House of Cards. And before they had even started it, they commissioned 2 shows. That has never happened in the history of any broadcaster. You don't commission multiple shows off the starting grid. But Netflix was able to do that because they were so sure that the data that they had created would create this a successful show. So as you can see, 3 months of introducing House of Cards, Netflix added 2 million subscribers in the US and 1 million subscribers internationally. Let me tell you, coming from this industry, adding 3 million subscribers is not a child's play. So let's see what's happening to the consumer. We'll not go too far. Hotstar, which is one of the leading media players in India, what they did was they launched the free platform, and then they launched their premium service, which was the paid service. Now, they had to convert their free users into the premium users, and when you do that, you spend a lot of marketing dollars, and the efficiency of the marketing dollars, or the return on your investment, is basis the click-through rate. So what they did was they created live user segments. They did the entire user segment analysis, and then they used personalized tech to send them the notifications, because they knew what kind of shows a user watches at what kind of time, at what time the users are watching the shows maximum on their platform, and what kind of notifications do they like to see. What is it that they skip? What is it that they see? They analyzed their entire behavior, and their click-through rate went up by 3x. Netflix, from a recommendation system, again, in the OTT industry, recommendation system is one of the USPs that all of us are trying to build. So what is it that their subscription, so when a media company puts out content, it's very important for that content, especially on the OTT platform, to actually be consumed. because there is a carousel that can hold only so much of content. The rest of it is all hidden in the layers of an OTT platform. How do you discover that content? So Netflix collected all sorts of user behavior data. They derived insights, and as a result of that, 80% of content which is streamed on Netflix is basis their recommendation engine. Also, another statistic which is not here, 90% plus of all the content which is residing on Netflix, and you're talking a plethora of content which is residing on that platform, gets sampled by the users at least once every month. And that's just the power of analytics that Netflix uses.
When you're surfing through Netflix on the bus, the train, work, or in the comfort of your home on your couch, how do you pick what to watch? Is it a
The other interesting thing that Netflix did, which is similar to trailers, is the thumbnails that come to you. So the thumbnails that you see on Netflix, the small little thumbnail on which you click to enter a show, they personalize these thumbnails. So they created multiple thumbnails for every show, and basis your interest in that show, whether you were attracted to a kind of scene, whether you were attracted to some kind of an actor or actress in that scene, they created personalized thumbnails. So Stranger Things, when Stranger Things gets served to you, if 50 people are watching Stranger Things, there would be 50 different thumbnails. It's not one thumbnail that they create, and it's all created by the machine.
At its heart, Netflix is all about creating personalized experiences, or rather, calculating them. They'll draw you in with curated trailers of upcoming releases, point out new episodes from previously watched videos, and even gauge your interest in content via match scores. And while streaming services are notoriously tight-lipped about sharing their viewership data, over the years, Netflix has shared glimpses into how their technology works. According to internal studies, a typical viewer spends 1.8 seconds considering each title, and Netflix believes it only has 90 seconds to get your attention before you move on to another activity. And among all the things that could catch your attention and make you watch a show, or several, Netflix found the biggest influence were the thumbnails. Humans are intensely visual creatures. Our eyes move 3 to 4 times a second to process new information. And because Netflix's goal is to get your attention and hold it, the company puts a lot of work into choosing every thumbnail you'll see. But before they can decide what image will show up on your account, they have to sift through a ton of data. An hour-long Stranger Things episode has almost 86,000 video frames. To figure out which ones will make the best thumbnails, Netflix uses a pretty scientific selection process called Aesthetic Visual Analysis, or AVA. AVA is a set of tools and algorithms that search Netflix videos for the best images and pull them out to create thumbnails. The process can be broken down into 2 basic steps. First is frame annotation. A program analyzes every static frame of a video, and image recognition algorithms use information gleaned from each shot to create metadata. The metadata is like an electronic fingerprint, identifying characteristics unique to each video frame. All of this helps build a database of information that makes it easier to pick out the best images for thumbnails later. And to sort all of this data, the company groups it into roughly 3 categories that are key to identifying good images. Visual, focusing on brightness, color, contrast, and motion blur. Contextual, which documents face and object detection, motion, and shot angles. And compositional, which focuses on visual principles in cinematography, photography, and design. The second step is a process called image ranking. An algorithm uses the metadata to pick out specific shots that Netflix has determined are the most attractive and clickable. Ones that aren't blurry, have varied imagery, feature major characters, and don't contain sensitive or unauthorized branded content. Then finally, a creative team steps in to use the best images to design the thumbnail artwork. But the process doesn't stop there. Netflix still has to figure out which ones work best for each user. A/B testing is executed again, and again. You'll regularly see changes in your thumbnails based on your engagement with previous titles. On the most basic level, let's say you're a fan of comedy and you've watched a bunch of stand-up specials. When you search for Good Will Hunting, you may get a thumbnail with Robin Williams, a famous comedian, and one of the movie's main characters. But people more into romance titles could be shown the cover art with the 2 leads kissing. There are also regional differences. From glancing at a show's thumbnails across different countries, you could infer Germany is more into abstract images, and US viewers may prefer clearly defined characters and story plots. Though there are a considerable number of thumbnails to choose from and lots of science that goes into each decision, it doesn't mean Netflix gets it right all the time. One Twitter user found the cover art for Like Father, a movie starring Kristen Bell, Kelsey Grammer, and Seth Rogen, had cover art that didn't exactly match who the lead actors in the film were. It was also kind of odd to see on my own account that the Catwoman thumb had an image of a barely recognizable supporting actress Sharon Stone, and Blade 2 had someone other than its star Wesley Snipes in the thumbnail. Netflix is obsessed with A/B testing new features like video promos, intro skipping, and auto-playing trailers, just as obsessively as they are with testing thumbnails. Netflix wants everyone to watch more, so it's unlikely they'll stop doing these tests. And if you don't like being a guinea pig, there is the option to opt out. But with binge watching quickly becoming a national pastime, it's likely that
So Netflix, as a result of this, attains a 90% engagement rate basis the thumbnails that they create with their original content. You saw some of that is not entirely accurate, and that's the evolution of machine learning. It takes time for the machine to become 100% accurate, but it's a journey we are all on right now. So what is it that we did at Viacom? So one of the challenges that when you run a movie channel, you have a library of hundreds and hundreds of movies. And while you're running a movie channel, the competition is also running movie channels. And every slot, you're competing for those eyeballs, who's going to watch your movie versus who's going to watch someone else's movie. And the good news or the bad news is that it's not bivariate. It's not only the movie channels that you're competing with everything else that's happening out there. So we created a model whereby we took our entire library of movies. For those movies, we took all their IMDb ratings. We took a lot of other factors like what is competition playing, which is direct competition, what is competition playing, which is indirect competition, and if there are any one-off events that we are already aware of that are happening, or that could be continuously be inputted into our model. Basis that, every week and every month, we create a programming chart for our programming team in the movies business, which tells them slot by slot which movie they should play in which slot, and hence how do you maximize the ratings for that channel. And the reason in the television business ratings is important is because that is our currency. That's the currency on which our advertisers give us money. And rating is nothing but how many people are watching the show, and on an average per person, how much time have they spent watching that show, that movie, whether it's 30-minute slot, whether it's a 1-hour slot, whether it's a 3-hour slot. So we created this tool which would create the optimal programming chart for the channel, and we didn't stop there. What we did was that we gave that tool to our programming team because initial buy-in from programming teams are hard. They don't trust a machine. They're like, come on, I have been in this business for the last 20 years. You can't tell me now a machine has come and can do better programming or better scheduling of content than I can. We gave them the tool where we said, okay, you change the movies. You don't like some slot. You don't want to play a movie in a certain slot. Change it. However, what the tool did was that the tool was then tell them, if you were to change this slot, if you were to insert this movie, then this is what your rating for this week would be. This is what your rating for this day would be. This is what your rating for this slot would be. And over time, from the time we developed the model to the time the model took to stabilize, we went to a 95% accuracy level. So that's the kind of accuracy level we received, and this has now become par for the course for us. For any scheduling, now we use machine-based models, which tells us the ideal schedule, because the kind of factors that we take into account. So for example, for this model, we started with 100 factors. We boiled them down to less than 10, but we started with 100 factors. That what are those factors that would affect rating for this slot? Let's see from an advertiser standpoint some of the use cases that we have in our industry. So I'll start with Viacom 18. Now, again, I don't have to explain ratings to you, but the way advertisers pay money is you have a program segment which is going on, a program is going on, a Nagin is going on, a Saas Bahu program is going on, and then you take a break. So you have a buildup of viewership, and then all of a sudden it drops because people switch off, they go to some other channel, they don't want to see the advertising, and hence the number of people for the time that they are watching drops, and hence my rating drops. Now this drop or the reverse of this drop is called retention. So my program rating can be extremely high, and then that helps me establishing my channel rank in the genre amongst my competitors. But while that is only one factor the advertisers look at, for them, that rating point during the ad break is more important because that's what they measure at. How much money have they spent per rating point? That's the only metric that any advertiser in the country uses. So for us, the challenge was, can I now train my machine to say, what is the optimal time I should take my first break, how much time that first break should be for, and then so on and so forth. So if there is a 30-minute slot, and if I have to take 2 breaks, what are the timings that I should take those 2 breaks, and how long should the breaks be for? And this is a challenge that the entire television industry has grappled with for years. We created a AI/ML model for this one, where again we took factors from competition, what is happening. It changes during IPL, it changes during elections, it changes in a prime time slot, it changes in a non-prime time slot, it changes on a weekend. So we had to, as a result of that, we keep creating multiple models. It changes from market to market because cultural sensitivities are different. So for example, if you look at the Hindi-speaking market, the drop-off rate is fairly high during a break, whereas if you see the southern markets, the drop-off rate is not that high. The tolerance for breaks in southern markets is higher than it is in northern markets, and that's the reality of our business. And hence, we have to create different models. So we've created now a model for most of our channels where the machine tells us at what time should you take a break, how long that break should be for, and the only objective function there is how do I maximize my retention, which means that my content has driven a certain program viewership. How do I ensure that the viewership during a break is close to the program segment? So this is another example. It's a global example. Televisa, which is Mexico's largest broadcaster or the biggest broadcaster, they again had the same dilemma. They were again competing against this whole rating points. However, they were also competing against the digital platforms. For us, the kitty is very large, and we don't have to worry so much about digital platforms taking away ad dollars, but Mexico, the kitty is smaller, and hence they have to worry about that. Whereas the digital guys come up with the kind of data which I'll just talk about in some of my slides later. Television companies were struggling with, how do I start selling consumer segments? I'm selling rating points. I don't know my consumer. How do I start selling consumer segments? So Televisa, this is what they did. They created, so basis all the data that they get, and this is something which is technical called return path RPT boxes, where in your set-top box there is a return path enabled, so all the data that you consume at your end on television gets captured by the broadcaster or by the distributor. It doesn't happen in India so much today, because in India we still go with metered analysis. So BARC has put, which is the body that measures ratings, has put X number of meters across the country. It's a sample data which is then extrapolated. But they were able to put a lot of RPT boxes, and they started gathering actual data, whereby they created multiple audience segments. And this is what they did. So they went to an advertiser. They said, you want a housewife 19 to 54 ABC. We will give you an advertising plan which will cover this consumer segment. Now, this is a journey we are just starting in India. It happens on digital all the time, but in television, we don't have consumer segments. But Televisa was able to do that because of the humongous data that they were able to gather, and they crunched all of that data to convert, to move from rating point selling to audience selling. Because this is what we are competing against. Every traditional media company is competing with the kind of data, for example, Facebook has. Not only does it have demographic data, it has behavior data, it has interest data. So as a result, if there is an advertiser which is looking at single people who are technology early adopters and who are interested in marathons, they can target these people using Facebook. Now, if this is the world that traditional media has to compete with, it's only going to happen with collecting more data and analyzing it. So what's the way forward? What's the roadmap? First and foremost, you have to define your business objectives. And this is something that I say all the time. Technology is an enabler. Technology doesn't come and change anything. So your business objectives have to be defined accordingly. You have to prioritize. There is humongous money that gets spent in analytics and in artificial intelligence. So you have to prioritize. What is it that you're going after? And also because the kind of data, once you start collecting data, it just overwhelms you. You don't know where to start. You don't know where to stop. You might be the smartest kid in the room, but you just get a little overwhelmed. So you have to prioritize, and then you achieve scale. And that's what we have been doing. So at Viacom 18, for example, the data science team started as one joint team for our digital businesses and our broadcast businesses. Over time, we have segregated the two teams because the priorities are different, the ways of working are different. So we have a dedicated corporate analytics or a broadcast analytics team, and we have a dedicated digital ventures data science team. So what's the future? If you were to ask me if I were to envision the future, content creation, which is the holy grail of our industry, and where all of us believe that that is a forte of creators, well, ML has started, artificial intelligence has started making dents in that already. This is just an example of some of the things that are happening. Once they achieve scale, we are trying to demystify content. Broadcaster OTT platforms, revenue solutions I told you about. In terms of distribution and consumption, be it highlight generation or promo generation that I just showed you, be it personalized push notifications, be it recommendation engine, be it entertainment assistants. Some of that is already here, but believe you me, we have only scratched the surface of the iceberg right now. There is much more to happen. And one thing that we are all cognizant of in our industry is that in the next 5 years, we will entirely change the way we consume content. And if companies like us, we are not ready for that, we'll be left far behind. Thank you.
We'll take 2 quick questions. Any questions? Yeah.
Hello, I'm Chaturanga. Thank you for the presentation and all the user cases. My question is, you are predicting the ranking. You're doing a project on predicting the ranking for any content. So in that, there are, say, 100 variables. Some will be controllable by the content provider. Some will be not. Some will be outside. Some will be inside. So in this case, when you show this prediction, they can improve it. So the prediction goes wrong. So this is normal in some of the analytics predictions. When you give the prediction, the business can change the outcome. So
Yes.
how do you deal with this in terms of talking about accuracy, and how does it work?
Well, so when the outcome is different from what we have predicted, and hence I'm saying that's one of the reasons that contributes to that 5% error rate. So every week and every month, we keep refreshing the models, and that's how the model keeps learning better. Now, will the model ever reach 100% accuracy? No, because something would have happened in the life of television whereby the eyeballs would move away. I'll give you an example. Article 370. The entire, or the very large chunk of television audience moved from entertainment to news channels when Article 370 happened. So those are outliers that we can never predict, and those would always be there. And hence, even if we achieve a 5 to 7% error rate, or MAPE as we call it, we are happy with that model.
Hi. Should I?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Go ahead. So my question is on the future that you talked about, right? What could we see in the future? Now, I'm Ranga from U Plus AI. So 2 things I've seen is there is a Black Mirror episode called Bandersnatch, where it makes it when you're watching the show, you can interact. You can choose what the user is going to do next. Similar on the lines is Bear Grylls' Man vs. Wild, where you can actually in an episode choose whether he climbs a tree or explores the forest. So if you take it to a movie like Sholay, I might want to see Sholay end on a note where I don't know whether Gabbar died or not. Let's say he just falls off a cliff. Whereas somebody might want to see, Gabbar beaten to pulp. Or then somebody might want to see Gabbar shot, in the most clean way. So how are you thinking about this? About where there can be multiple endings, multiple choices within, different points of the movie that users may want to see, and how that can be made into a business model?
So, good question. So Bandersnatch, if you see Bandersnatch, that was Netflix's first attempt to have some kind of dynamism in their story, which was basis user engagement. The reality is that that movie flopped massively. So they have lost that movie, but the hope is not lost. This is just the starting point. I think all of us are looking at that. We are all looking at creating interactive content. We are all looking at seeing how is it that I can pivot the story along the way. Now, there are production challenges in that, because if I want to see something else, it can't just come in then and there. It has to be shot accordingly. So today, because there is a lot of human intervention, there would be time involved. So right now, there would just be about 1, 2, 3 choices that are pre-shot and that are given to the consumer. But if the consumer were to say that, no, I want to create my own story, we are getting there. And we are sowing early seeds of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.